Modern farming has changed it. We're now reseeding regularly. We're grazing out paddocks religiously, in the grazing platform. We're intensely fertilizing to the last, and our weather patterns then haven't helped, because over the last number of years, we're seeing more water come down or more drought, or both in the same year. More extremes in every aspect, so we have to deal with that and try to maintain reproduction, milk production and general health of the cows at the same time. So it's quite a challenging scenario there.
I suppose getting right into it, Folke, what should we be doing at this stage of the year to focus on hitting fertility targets down the line?
So we're in January now, we're coming to the end of it, but I don't know, I'll just throw it out there. Who has already started calving, or who's in a year-round system? Who's in a year-round system? No? One. And who's seasonal? Seasonal calving? Pretty much everybody else. Have you calves on the ground yet, or have you? Yeah. A few calves? Yeah. No. No. Most of you starting in February. Would that be right? Yeah.
I suppose we're probably in later.
Yeah, we're a little bit later. In the south now, they're started kind of last week. Last weekend we had our first section in the practice with Siamese twins. Terrible looking calf. I won't show pictures of it. But that's the normal nature of the season now. So why are we talking about fertility in January? What we do over the next month or two when our cows are calving, that's going to be critical how good they are going in calf in the next, in 3 months' time. First of all, follicle development in a cow takes roughly about 90 days. So what follicles are growing now in the cows around the time of calving and shortly after, that's the follicles that are going to be released and fertilized in your start of your breeding season. So you have to keep that in mind, that whatever the cow is made up now, whether she's deficient or whether she's too fat or whatever is the matter with the cow now, it has an effect on the fertility directly like that. And then we have the indirect things that affect fertility, which are connected to calving, obviously, difficult calvings, then assistance at calving, milk fever around calving, ketosis after calving, mastitis. All those things are detrimental to fertility. There are plenty of studies out there that show how much of each of these afflictions basically reduce fertility later. So basically what I'm looking at is trying to eliminate or reduce the amount of these incidences as much as possible, because everything happens from the day they calve until 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later. Usually the cow is out of the worst at that stage. If she held the cleaning by 6 weeks on, she's either made it or she hasn't. She's cleaned out or not. So things like that you have to deal with now. The very important thing that I find from a vet's point of view, and I think it's being discussed amongst the farmers as well, is that the more records you have for us as vets coming up to the breeding season, the more we can help with getting these cows in calf that had an issue. So I want you to record when they calved, how they calved, whether they bull or heifer, whether there was any incidents around the calving, if she got milk fever, if she was slow to eat, anything at all. The more information we have, the better, and then we can act on that. And we want to see the kind of cows that are likely to have an issue in the fertility later. So I don't know if Patrick, would you put up that record sheet, please? So there's a couple of things that I've just stuck up there, as a guide. And I don't know whether you're using an app or if you're using a little notebook or anything at all, but I want every farmer really to write down at night when they come in for their tea, write down what happened to which cow today, and if there was anything that they treated. Even cases of mastitis or so, they're going to be later on important. Particularly we're going to be talking about sex semen. So certain afflictions to cows around calving time are going to eliminate cows from the use of sex semen from our selection point of view.
You mentioned an app there, Ms. Folke. Do you have any particular favourites, or any, how would you suggest people keep records?
Yeah, I don't, I'll be honest with you. I have no favourite, and whatever the farmers are using already, happy out to use whatever, but as long as you can put all that data in there. And if you can't, and you want to do it simple, and you want to use a little notebook with a pen in the back pocket, don't wash it. Make sure that it's there in 3 months' time, or in 2 months' time when you're starting to do your selections, which is around 3 or 4 weeks before you start breeding. That's when you go through your book again. So all these records, I just want them filled. So the answer to Eamon is, no, I don't have a preference. I don't care.
Whatever works.
Whatever works for people, but beautiful part of the country, but down in our area in the south, it's quite, we're quite tight in labour, we're quite tight in qualified vets, and whatever call outs we want to get them and get them done efficiently. So to get a call in June for checking cows that haven't come cycling or so, that calved in February, it is kind of a waste of time on my side, because what can I do in June that I should have done in April? So realistically, if you have your records, if you go through your records on time and then call the vet and say, right, I have 20 cows to scan, they held the cleaning, they had milk fever, and they didn't come cycling, and that's it.
A lot of people firstly probably go in and they do a whole herd scan, pre-breeding scan. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sometimes that's maybe due to no records or poor records. Yeah. Listen, if I'm asked to do a whole herd scan, I'll try and do it, but it is a bit of a waste, because a cow that calved easy, had no issues since she calved, and she's cycling, what am I going to say? Don't breed her later, breed her now, bring her on, give her prostaglandin. No, so you want to actually present cows that are likely to have an issue. If you want, you can present the cows that you have picked out on a list. I want to give sex semen to these cows. Please check, are they 100% clean, and is ovarial wise and so on, are they okay? I'll do that, but not the whole herd, sorry.
I suppose there's a lot of talk about minerals, and a lot of companies out there pushing minerals, and some people tell you they've a huge importance and a huge role to play in fertility and all that. What significance would you see in the use of minerals?
Yeah, minerals is a very complicated issue, because yes, minerals are extremely important in the health, in the fertility, and in the immunity of a cow. So if the mineral balance, be it mass minerals or trace elements, are out of sync, deficient, or oversupplied and slightly toxic, it can have quite negative effects on either health, fertility, or production, and it can really put cows out of sync. I place a big role on making sure that every herd has done a couple of mineral checks during the year in order to know where they stand. Ideally in conjunction with a feed sample, silage and grass, so that you know what is in the ground, what's in the grass, what's getting into the cow, and what does the cow actually absorb. In many cases, you're probably familiar with copper and an antagonistic effect that molybdenum, iron, and sulfur has on the copper uptake inside in cows. So if oral copper is coming in and it is in the presence of molybdenum or iron or so, it can be inhibited from being absorbed. So it basically goes in and comes out again, and the cow actually gets very little of it into her system. So from that point of view, a blood test is great. It establishes whether the cow is deficient. Copper, iodine, selenium, probably the most important ones. Cobalt, zinc, lesser extent. Phosphorus, magnesium, very important at different times of the year. So, you will find that the information you get at different times of the year is going to play a very important role in what your supplemental decisions are going to be.
So you would suggest more than one mineral sample during the course of the year?
I find that the mineral sample testing in pre-calving, pre-service, peak production, and maybe before drying off again, they're the ones that are very important. And then whatever supplementation farmers do, whether it's an oral mineral, whether it's a bolus, whether it's liquid minerals, Terra Nutri, pump mineral into the water system, whatever system they use with a blood test, at least you know how much of it is actually arriving inside the cow. And it's quite critical. I see a lot of farmers spending loads of money on very expensive minerals. Do they need them? Well, they might need one or two ingredients of it, but they don't need the rest of it. You know, so it can be very economical to get a couple of blood tests done and then do a selective process of mineral supplementation accordingly. And I think that's critical, that farmers know at what time of the year their herd is, you know, okay in copper for fertility, okay for selenium or iodine for calf vitality and immunity and things like that.
And do mineral levels vary much, say, over the course of a year?
They do actually, and like I do, I suppose over the last couple of years now we have maybe 40. And what I did was I took the laptop and I went through all the records and I actually checked what areas and what elements are mostly deficient at what times of the year. And it's very interesting because, for example, selenium is lowest at the back end of the year and before calving, and usually increases then probably as the cows get a fair bit of selenium in through dairy, nuts and things like that. But they can be quite run down with selenium in areas. Probably 50% of the herds we check run low in the winter quarter or winter 2 quarters. And copper, for example, the deficiencies often go all year round.
And it's at calving time that selenium is most critical, is it?
Selenium is very critical around calving time. I think anybody who has had selenium deficiency, I'm not sure whether this area is prone to it, but they would see calves weak, you know, don't want to get drinking, they're slow in getting up, and you know, they're really kind of sluggish, and they usually succumb to some kind of an infection then very quickly.
Yes,
iodine is very similar. Yeah. Iodine, then you could even get a dead calf born by itself, popped out, never lifted the head, dead. You know, just iodine deficient. So from that point of view, you know, at this time of year, I suppose for somebody calving in February, you mightn't be too late yet to just get a couple of cows at random sampled. We will always sample somewhere between 6 and 10 cows from each herd, depending on the size. And that will do. You know, you don't need to take, out of 400 cows, you don't need to take 40.
And how do you go about selecting cows for
which ones to pick?
Yeah, which ones to pick?
Which ones to pick? 2 thin ones, 2 fat ones, 2 old ones, 2 young ones, and the next 2 that walk out of the parlour. This is a result from a herd, sample herd, just, I didn't put the name up obviously. A herd I went to in December for the very first time. 150 cows, all the cows dry since the 20th of October. They were on dry cow diet. He started them on kind of drying off diet, and he started them ordinary dry cow diet. He didn't start the mineral supplementation yet. And as you can see there, for example, selenium there, the normal ranges are between 60 and 200. In this herd, none of the animals reached 30, which is the half of the normal range. So drastically deficient in selenium, and also, as you can expect, in copper and iodine, because they didn't get any supplementation. He had no idea what his ground or water contained in iron or molybdenum or anything like that. So, you know, this is I have to say, you know, to his defense, he's a new entrant. He wasn't in dairying in 21, he started in 22. So, you know, he was a bit green. But, you know, as you can see, you know, we had to instantly act in December in order to get things sorted. He actually started out with boluses, and then he put powder mineral over the feed now, the dry cow mineral as well.
You mentioned there earlier on about interactions between different minerals or trace elements.
Yeah, there's antagonism, particularly like iron is actually often not very well understood one, because if you do your silage sampling and your Soil sampling, you find that iron is normal. Check your water as well. Often in different areas now, water sources can be very, very high in iron. And I don't know whether any of you have their own wells on farms and know their analysis of their own water. My simple way of saying it, how do you know whether iron is very high in the water? If your tea tastes absolutely better than anywhere else in the world, you probably have very high iron in the water, because it makes tea taste absolutely brilliant. I had that because people come to my, I have a well and we have very high iron, and there are people coming to my house drinking tea from home, from Germany, where I'm from originally, and they would say, God, the tea is brilliant, I must bring a box home with me. It makes no difference whether you use Barry's tea or Lyon's tea or any other Aldi tea, they will never get the taste back because the water is critical. And so I'm only saying the iron in the water, which interferes with selenium to some extent, but mostly with copper as well, that is critical to know. And that's why, when we do our practice, do the investigations on farm, we use the blood samples, the feed samples, and possibly water samples as well, to see where is the antagonism, where is the interactions there.
You see some mineral salesmen or companies, and they push the idea of chelated minerals as if it was something special. So is there something in that, or what's the advantage of chelated minerals over non-chelated?
Yeah, for example, like minerals in bag minerals or in bolus format, they can contain, for example, copper or selenium in different ways. Copper oxide, copper sulfate, or chelated or protected. So 4 different types of copper, for example. And I looked at all the different, well, not all of them, but I looked at a good few of the standard available boluses that are out there, and compared them and looked at what copper is in them, what they release on a daily basis, and whether it is protected, chelated, or simple oxide, which is ionized copper, that then competes in the rumen with iron and molybdenum, particularly sulfur to some extent as well. So the ones in bold are protected, chelated copper. The ones in brackets are unprotected. So different boluses, for example, have different types of copper in them, and the chelated product will have the great advantage that it bypasses the rumen. It goes undiluted into the small intestine. That's where copper gets absorbed in the cow. So it doesn't get absorbed in the rumen. In the rumen, the antagonists strike and bind against it, and then it passes out. So anything that has copper oxide or copper ionized in it will compete with molybdenum. If you know you have a high molybdenum, high iron feed or water, you then have to go with a chelated product. There's no other way. If you don't, you can hammer in copper sulfate.
To say, in general, when it comes to minerals, you get what you pay for.
In a way, you get what you pay for, or you have a very good salesman that charges an awful lot more for a cheap mineral. That can happen too. I'd always warn people that sometimes the mineral that the cows really like, that's the one that has an awful lot of salt in it. And salt is cheap, and sand is cheap, and calcium is cheap, and and a lot of other ingredients are expensive, and that's why they're not in the really good minerals. Yeah.